It was the morning of August 7, 1942. A cold, gray mist hung low over the frozen marshes near Leningrad, draping the landscape in a spectral silence. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and fuel, punctuated by the distant hum of engines in the Luftwaffe's forward airfield. The skeletal trees shivered in the wind, and the clouds pressed low, threatening rain but never delivering, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. Oberleutnant Hans Keller walked briskly across the tarmac, the leather of his flight jacket creaking with each step. At 26, he was already a veteran, molded by years of training and early combat over the Eastern Front. Born in Dresden to a mechanic father and a schoolteacher mother, Keller had grown up disassembling engines, gliders, and anything that moved. By 16 he had flown gliders above the Elbe, and by 20 he was mastering the art of aerial combat in the Luftwaffe. Calm, precise, and almost unnervingly patient, Keller had a reputation among his peers for anticipating chaos before it arrived. Today, though, even he felt the subtle tension that comes when the skies themselves seem to wait. Ahead of him, his Bf 109 F4 waited like a coiled predator. Its polished metal fuselage reflected the dim light of the morning, every rivet and seam placed with ruthless precision. Empty weight barely 2,400 kilograms. Powered by the mighty Daimler-Benz DB601 engine, the fighter could reach speeds of 660 km per hour at optimal altitude. Its wings, thin and aerodynamic, were built for lightning-quick turns, climbs, and dives. Through its propeller hub fired a 20mm MG-151 cannon, supported by two synchronized 7.92mm MG-17 machine guns above the cowling. The weapons were not just deadly, they were surgical, designed to strike fast and vanish before the enemy could respond. Keller approached the cockpit, placing his hands on the fuselage, feeling the subtle vibrations of life beneath his fingers. The engine shuddered as it roared to life, the propeller cutting the misty morning air. The aircraft trembled lightly, alive, as though aware of the storm it would unleash. Mechanics moved quickly, their eyes flicking to the horizon, checking fuel lines and bolts with meticulous care. Intelligence reports had warned of Soviet Yak-1 patrols in these skies, unaware of the predator waiting in their path. Keller climbed into the cockpit, the canopy ceiling shut with a firm click. He strapped himself in, running his hands over familiar controls, feeling the subtle tension of the hydraulic levers, the calibrated resistance of the rudder pedals. Every instrument, every gauge, every button responded with mechanical precision. The Bf 109 was more than metal and oil, it was a living extension of its pilot, and today, it would be tested. The wind howled against the cockpit, carrying the scent of damp earth and frost. Keller's eyes traced the horizon, searching the gray skies for movement. The distant drone of engines from other Luftwaffe planes blended with the hum of his own, a prelude to what was coming. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the first Yakovlev Yak-1 fighters were already on patrol, unaware that the very definition of speed and precision was hurtling toward them. The radio crackled to life. A terse voice, low and unwavering, spoke. "Today, we test limits beyond imagination." Keller nodded to himself, hands tightening around the control column. Outside, the mist swirled in currents around the airfield, the world suspended in expectation. And then, almost as if the sky itself whispered the warning, a thought pressed itself into the morning air. Soviet generals were shocked when Bf 109s destroyed entire Yak squadrons instantly. The words lingered, impossible yet inevitable. Keller's eyes narrowed on the horizon, the F-4 beneath him trembling with latent power. Soon, the calm of the airfield would give way to a moment that would leave history reeling, a moment that only a machine of unparalleled design, in the hands of a pilot honed by instinct and precision, could achieve. The mist lifted slightly, revealing a horizon wide and gray, holding the first faint shapes of enemy aircraft. Keller tightened his grip. The engines thrummed, a heartbeat of metal and fuel. And somewhere beyond the clouds, destiny waited. The engines of the Bf 109 F4 rumbled deeper as Keller ran through the final pre-flight checks. Every gauge flickered to life, every dial settled in its place. The propeller sliced through the lingering morning mist, throwing droplets into shimmering arcs across the tarmac. Mechanics stepped back, nodding quietly to one another, They knew better than to speak too loudly. This was more than a flight. It was a test of human skill and engineering in perfect synchrony. Keller's hands moved with practiced precision, guiding the throttle forward. The aircraft shuddered as the full force of the Daimler-Benz DB601 engine responded, its growl echoing through the empty airfield. The vibration thrummed through his bones, a living pulse that seemed to whisper the secrets of the skies. The canopy fogged slightly from his breath, the cockpit a small, isolated world where focus was absolute. He taxied slowly toward the runway, the wheels carving shallow ruts in the damp earth. Each step forward seemed to stretch the silence, the mist swirling around the landing gear. Keller felt the tension tighten in his shoulders, anticipation coiling inside him. The radio crackled again, voices distant but urgent, confirming positions of reconnaissance units and giving the last-minute coordinates. The enemy had been spotted earlier in the morning, small formations of Yak-1s and occasional IL-2 bombers maneuvering at different altitudes. They were unaware of the storm approaching, unaware that one man and his aircraft would rewrite the rules of engagement in moments. He eased the throttle forward, the nose lifting slightly as the wheels began to roll faster. Keller felt the F-4's responsiveness immediately, the way it leaned subtly under his touch, the way the rudder reacted almost intuitively. In the air, it would climb like a jagged arrow, accelerate like a striking serpent, and carve through clouds with minimal drag. He was intimately aware of the weight distribution, the delicate balance between maneuverability and firepower. As the runway stretched ahead, Keller adjusted his engine mixture and tested the ailerons. The aircraft responded flawlessly, banking slightly with a whisper of air resistance, obedient to his hands. Every vibration, every minor shift, told him exactly how the machine was performing. The day's mission was clear: intercept and disrupt Soviet air patrols, strike fast, and return. Yet even in these straightforward orders, Keller sensed the extraordinary potential, the almost impossible edge this aircraft gave him. The Yak-1 formations were reported climbing toward the northern corridor, their engines faint but audible even from the ground. Keller's mind ran through the calculations: climb rate, speed, wind direction, cloud cover, attack vector. The F-4's superior rate of climb would allow him to gain altitude before the enemy had even realized his presence. Its light frame and powerful engine meant bursts of acceleration that could put him behind enemy lines in seconds, or vanish into clouds before return fire could find him. He eased the aircraft onto the main runway. The tires squealed lightly against wet concrete as he advanced the throttle fully. The Bf-109 surged forward with a growl, its slender wings trembling with the sudden force. Keller pressed back gently on the control stick, and the aircraft lifted off smoothly, cutting through the mist like a silver knife. The world below fell away, and the gray expanse of the marshes opened up beneath him, stretching toward the horizon. In the cockpit, Keller felt the exhilaration of pure control. The wind buffeted lightly against the fuselage, the propeller creating a constant drone that became the rhythm of thought. He banked slightly, climbing to an altitude where the clouds could provide cover, the mist below turning to soft gray waves. The reconnaissance reports confirmed enemy movement. A squadron of 10 Yak-1s spread thin, moving in what they believed was a secure corridor. They had no idea what was coming. "Hold nothing back," Keller muttered to himself, voice steady over the hum of the engine. "Today, they will see the precision of design and skill, nothing else." The words felt almost ceremonial, as though the Bf-109 itself could sense the tension and readiness in its pilot. Every gauge, every vibration, every tremor from the engine spoke the same message: the impossible was about to be attempted. From above, the clouds scrolled past like frozen rivers, and Keller adjusted the trim, letting the aircraft glide in a subtle, predatory arc below. The shadow of the F-4 flickered across the marshes, unseen but present, a harbinger of the chaos to come. Even at this altitude, the superior climb rate of the Bf-109 allowed him to approach the Yak squadron without detection, his speed and position calculated to the second. The mission had begun, yet the most dramatic moment, the one that would shock even Soviet generals, was still moments away. Keller's eyes narrowed on the horizon, where faint dots began to form against the gray sky. The Yak-1s, numbering more than 10, were climbing in loose formation, unaware that one aircraft alone could challenge their entire squadron. He whispered under his breath, almost to the aircraft itself, "Let's show them what precision really means." The mist thinned slightly, revealing the first hints of the enemy formation. Keller's heart beat steadily, matched by the engine's growl, a perfect harmony of man and machine. In seconds, altitude, speed, and calculated aggression would combine to produce an event that would leave commanders on both sides reeling. And above it all, the Bf-109 waited, poised like a striking falcon, its pilot ready to deliver the impossible. The gray expanse of the eastern sky stretched endlessly, broken only by the faint, restless movement of clouds. Keller had climbed above them, letting the Bf-109 F-4 glide in a gentle, predatory arc. The engine hummed with latent power, a barely contained growl vibrating through the slender fuselage. His eyes scanned the horizon, sharp and calculating, reading every shadow, every shift in light. Far below, the marshes were veiled in mist, the world of frozen gray only occasionally interrupted by the faint glint of rivers and ice patches. Ahead, the first Yak-1s emerged, their pale green fuselages and red stars almost imperceptible against the light gray of the clouds. Intelligence had underestimated their patrol pattern, and now Keller's training and instinct would allow him to take full advantage. 10 aircraft in loose formation, slightly dispersed, and climbing with confidence. They were unaware of the storm descending upon them. Keller's hands moved fluidly over the controls, adjusting trim and throttle, coaxing every ounce of performance from the aircraft. The Bf-109's climb rate was extraordinary. He was gaining altitude faster than the Yaks could anticipate, his thin wings slicing through the dense air with minimal resistance. Its engine delivered a consistent, almost unnatural thrust, allowing acceleration that could place him directly above the enemy formation in seconds. Every technical detail of the plane, the lightened fuselage, the aerodynamic wing design, the perfectly balanced armament, worked in concert with his skill, turning this aircraft into a weapon of surgical precision. From the ground, Soviet radar crews squinted at their scopes, noting the faint blips moving faster than expected. The commanding officer muttered under his breath, unsure of what he was witnessing. The radar signals flickered, tentative, almost questioning themselves. At this altitude, Keller's Bf-109 blended with cloud shadows and sunlight, a masterclass in stealth without relying on camouflage, just sheer velocity and calculated approach. Keller kept his eyes on the formation, analyzing angles, speed, and spacing. He could see the slight stagger in their climb, the hesitation of inexperienced pilots trying to maintain formation. This was the exact moment where speed, position, and tactical precision intersected. He adjusted the engine to optimal compression, feeling the vibrations change as the F-4 readied itself for the dive. The Yak-1s, despite their maneuverability, were unprepared for the vertical advantage Keller now held. The pilot's mind was clear, calculating, a rapid descent at full power, cannon aligned with precision, and machine guns synchronized perfectly with the trajectory. The Yak pilots had no reason to suspect that a single aircraft could dominate the engagement so completely. His altitude advantage gave him time and space, the clouds providing cover, the wind carrying him silently toward the unsuspecting squadron. "Hold steady," Keller whispered, more to himself than the aircraft. His fingers danced over the controls, adjusting every micro-angle. He visualized the attack pattern, imagining the squadron as a series of targets, each reachable within moments. The combination of his intimate knowledge of the Bf-109's behavior, its acceleration, climb rate, and firing accuracy, and the positioning of the enemy made the seemingly impossible achievable. In the command posts far below, Soviet officers were beginning to murmur in disbelief. One radar technician leaned forward, frowning. "Blip, too fast, approaching from above." Another shook his head. "Impossible. It's only one plane." Yet Keller's approach was not just speed, it was intelligence in motion, leveraging the F-4's design to its fullest. The first Yak pilot, catching a glimpse of a shadow above, adjusted his climb slightly, but it was already too late. Keller's position was perfect, height, angle, and speed combined into an unstoppable vector. He calculated the descent so precisely that the entire formation would come under fire before they could respond. The F-4 was now moments from initiating the maneuver that would shock all observers. Its wings cut through the air, engines roaring with a precision that seemed almost preternatural. Keller's hands were steady, his vision focused, the gray world around him narrowing to the enemy formation below. Every vibration of the machine, every subtle hum of the engine, signaled readiness. He allowed himself a brief thought. This is how it happens. This is the moment they never see coming. Below, the yaks continued their climb, still unaware, still confident. Keller's descent, calculated to the meter, would ensure the next minutes would become legend. Speed, position, and firepower had converged perfectly. The aircraft, the man, and the mission were aligned to achieve the impossible. And above it all, the clouds seemed to part just slightly, as if nature itself was granting him the perfect stage for the event that would leave Soviet generals shaking in disbelief, an entire yak squadron about to be obliterated with precision, almost instantaneously. The time had come. The F-109 trembled in anticipation, Keller's eyes narrowed, and the world below remained oblivious to the approaching storm. The gray morning sky seemed to hold its breath as Keller adjusted his throttle, letting the F-109 F-4 slip forward like a coiled predator. The Yak-1s below climbed in loose formation, their green fuselages and red stars visible only as small dots in the mist. Keller's eyes tracked every movement, calculating angles, velocity, and distance with a surgeon's precision. He was above them, nearly invisible against the clouds, and the next few seconds would decide everything. With a gentle push on the control column, he tipped the nose downward. Gravity aided the dive, and the aircraft accelerated with almost unnatural speed. The wind screamed past, a chorus of metal and air, yet Keller's hands were calm, controlling the plane with a mastery that made it seem part of him. Below, the yaks were still unaware, their formation imperfect, pilots scanning the sky but not expecting the storm directly above. Then, in an instant, the F-109 moved. The cannon roared, firing through the propeller hub with surgical timing, the 20mm shells tearing precise arcs toward the first yak. Machine guns rattled in rhythm, synchronized perfectly to the trajectory. In seconds, the lead aircraft shuddered and spiraled, its pilots struggling to regain control. The squadron wavered, confusion blooming as Keller's speed and altitude gave him no rival in the air. The Bf-109 climbed slightly, then dived again, the engine shrieking in protest as it cut across the formation. Each yak was a target, yet Keller's movements were almost invisible, a blur of silver and fire. In less than a minute, 3 yaks had faltered, smoke trailing their fuselages, the pilots struggling to react to the lightning strikes. The remaining aircraft attempted evasive maneuvers, but Keller anticipated each one. He banked sharply, climbed, and dove in a rhythm that combined physics, training, and the F-109's deadly engineering. From below, radar crews blinked at their screens in disbelief. "Impossible! It's only one aircraft!" one whispered. Soviet commanders shouted into radios, calling for reinforcements that could not reach in time. The yaks, spread out and confused, were sitting targets against a machine that combined raw power and precision. Keller's eyes never wavered. Each movement of the stick, each press of the pedal, each squeeze of the trigger was calculated. The aircraft responded instantly, a lethal partner in this deadly ballet. Within moments, the entire yak squadron, numbering 10 fighters, was disrupted, spinning, trailing smoke, or diving to escape. Keller's speed, altitude advantage, and impeccable aim had created a moment that seemed impossible. One man, one aircraft, overwhelming an entire squadron. "They vanished before we even knew what hit us," a Soviet pilot radioed, disbelief clear in his voice. The F-109 lifted slightly, engines roaring, then leveled out, letting the remaining aircraft scatter. Keller was already disappearing into the cloud cover, his altitude, speed, and knowledge of the terrain allowing him to vanish almost instantly. The yak pilots could only watch, stunned, as the shadow of the aircraft flickered across the clouds before fading completely. Mechanically, the plane had performed perfectly. The lightened fuselage, razor-thin wings, and powerful engine allowed for vertical and horizontal maneuvers impossible for the Yak-1s. Its precision cannon and machine guns executed the strike with almost preternatural accuracy. Keller's own skill, anticipating enemy movement, calculating angles, and timing his attacks, made the unbelievable real. "Entire squadron destroyed in seconds!" A radio transmission crackled from the Soviet command post, voices trembling in shock. As Keller leveled out above the clouds, he exhaled slowly. His hands relaxed on the controls, but the engine's growl remained, a reminder that the predator was still alive, still lethal. The gray sky stretched before him, empty now, yet heavy with the echoes of what had just occurred. In the span of minutes, he had transformed the morning air into a testament of precision, speed, and engineering mastery. The Yak-1s had vanished from formation, smoke trailing behind some, others diving for cover. Yet Keller, unscathed and precise, had accomplished what few could believe possible: one aircraft against an entire squadron, emerging victorious without a scratch. The moment would echo in radar rooms, command posts, and military reports for months, a single act of controlled destruction that would redefine what was possible in aerial warfare. Even the clouds seemed to part slightly, revealing the sun in a cold, pale shaft, as if granting witness to a moment of perfection. The Bf-109F-4 soared upward, engines screaming, pilot calm, the impossible achieved in a matter of seconds. Soviet generals were shocked. Keller whispered, knowing the story would reach them before long. And it would be a story they would never forget. Far below, in the gray, cramped rooms of Soviet command posts, officers and radar technicians stared in disbelief at their screens. The blips they had tracked only moments before were gone, dissipated as if erased by some invisible hand. The voices in the room were hushed, tense, broken by stammers and repeated disbelief. How could one plane do this?" one officer whispered, leaning closer to the radar scope as if proximity could reveal the answer. The other pilots in the room shook their heads, eyes wide, unable to reconcile what they had just witnessed. Reports crackled over the radio, fragments of confusion and fear. A Yak pilot, whose aircraft had barely escaped, described in halting words how the F-109 had appeared above them, precise and unstoppable, moving faster than the eye could track. It struck like lightning, 10 of us scattered in seconds," he stammered, still shaking. Another report followed from a different sector, confirming the same story: one aircraft had destroyed an entire squadron, or at least rendered it combat ineffective, before they could even respond. Mechanics and engineers at forward Soviet airfields were summoned immediately to analyze the wreckage and performance data from the surviving aircraft. They pored over bullet holes, smoke patterns, and reports, their faces growing paler as the details emerged. "The trajectory was impossible," muttered one senior engineer. "Even if the pilot had perfect aim, the speed and climb alone make this statistically improbable." They scribbled notes, ran calculations, and attempted to reconstruct the sequence, but each answer only deepened the mystery. Back at the radar stations, the technical crew replayed recordings of the engagement. Blip patterns showed a single, almost imperceptible signal that accelerated and vanished above the formation, a burst of speed unmatched by any known aircraft. Analysts debated and argued, some suggesting it had to be multiple fighters acting in perfect coordination, yet reports confirmed only one Bf-109 had been in the area. The commanders, seasoned men who had seen countless engagements on the Eastern Front, leaned back in their chairs, rubbing their eyes. Shock lingered in the room like smoke, heavy and inescapable. Even the pilots who had survived the encounter could not understand how the attack had unfolded. They spoke of precision fire, near invisible positioning, and a strike that seemed calculated down to the millisecond. The younger pilots were particularly shaken, their confidence shaken to its core. For the first time, they faced the possibility that one man in a machine could render an entire squadron helpless. Some sat silently, staring at the horizon, replaying the memory of smoke trails and spiraling aircraft in their minds. Technical reports followed in rapid succession. Analysts noted the F-109's climb rate, acceleration, and superior maneuverability. They calculated the impact of cloud cover and sun angle on visibility. The combination, they concluded reluctantly, made Keller's attack possible, but only if executed with inhuman precision. The data matched no previous engagement. It defied standard tactical doctrine. Manuals were referenced, calculations double-checked, yet each theory confirmed what the eye had already seen. The impossible had been accomplished. Across multiple airfields, the same stories circulated, whispered in awe and fear. Radar technicians, engineers, pilots, and commanders all repeated fragments of the story. 1 aircraft, 10 yaks, destroyed or scattered in seconds. Each repetition emphasized the incredulity. Even seasoned generals who had witnessed countless battles could not reconcile the feat with known limitations of aircraft and pilot skill. Some believed it might have been luck, others divine intervention, yet every rational calculation pointed to the same conclusion. The Bf-109F-4, piloted by a single man, had achieved an extraordinary, almost unbelievable victory. In these moments, the legend began to take shape. Reports were filed, but words could not fully capture the reality. Diagrams were drawn, simulations attempted, yet no combination of speed, altitude, and firepower explained the precision, timing, and skill simultaneously. The story traveled fast among pilots and ground crews. 1 aircraft, operating at the peak of its design, under the guidance of an exceptionally skilled pilot, had struck a squadron as if the laws of probability themselves had been rewritten. Even after hours of analysis, the sense of shock persisted. Orders were given for additional reconnaissance and stricter patrol patterns, but the lessons of that morning lingered far beyond tactical adjustments. The Bf-109F-4 had demonstrated what few imagined possible, and the psychological impact on enemy forces was undeniable. Officers, engineers, and pilots alike were left to reconcile the combination of design, environment, and human skill that had produced such an extraordinary result. In hushed tones and hurried reports, one phrase began to echo repeatedly through Soviet channels. Soviet generals were shocked. It was no exaggeration. Across command posts and radar stations, disbelief and awe mingled in equal measure. The F-109 and its pilot had achieved not just a tactical victory, but a psychological one, leaving the enemy grappling to understand how a single man and machine could dominate an entire squadron so completely. The Bf-109F-4 glided smoothly above the clouds, the engine's deep hum now a steady, satisfied rhythm rather than the tension of impending action. Keller leaned back slightly in his harness, eyes scanning the horizon that had moments ago been alive with movement, smoke, and chaos. Below, the marshes stretched in pale gray, empty now except for the distant silhouettes of retreating Yak-1s, their formation shattered, pilots shaken to the core. Keller adjusted the trim and began a slow descent toward his home airfield. The clouds parted here and there, revealing small patches of sun glinting off frozen rivers and puddles. In the cockpit, the smell of spent fuel and gunpowder lingered faintly, reminders of the precision attack he had executed. Every movement of the aircraft felt fluid, almost conversational, as though the machine itself knew it had fulfilled its purpose. The airfield came into view, quiet now, personnel waiting anxiously for his return. Mechanics and fellow pilots observed the F-109 as it cut across the tarmac, tires touching down with practiced precision. Keller taxied to a stop, cutting the engine, and sat for a moment, breathing steadily. The roar faded, replaced by the soft hiss of cooling metal. Silence, except for the distant wind and the faint sound of engines preparing for the next sortie. Mechanics approached cautiously, inspecting the aircraft. They ran hands over the fuselage, noting its pristine condition, the absence of damage, the flawless response of every control surface. "Remarkable," one murmured, almost reverently. "Every bolt, every panel, it's as if it anticipated the engagement itself." The ammunition counters were checked, the cannon empty, the machine guns expended. The Bf-109 had done exactly what it was built to do: strike with precision, achieve impossible results, and return unscathed. Back at command, reports were being filed rapidly. Keller was debriefed, yet his answers were calm, measured, almost understated. He spoke of altitude advantage, timing, precision fire, and the aircraft's behavior. Every word was factual, stripped of exaggeration. Yet those listening could sense the magnitude of the feat. One pilot, one plane, an entire squadron reduced to smoke and confusion in moments. The story spread quickly among Luftwaffe units. Pilots recounted the event with awe, emphasizing not only Keller's skill but the F-109's remarkable performance. In the barracks, mechanics joked quietly about the aircraft's sixth sense, while commanders nodded knowingly, acknowledging that this single sortie would become the stuff of legend. Even in enemy circles, the tale traveled fast. Soviet reports carried the words through command posts. Entire Yak squadron destroyed in seconds. Engineers tried to rationalize it, pilots replayed the engagement in their minds, and generals could only shake their heads. The psychological impact was immense. The boundaries of what was considered possible in aerial combat had been redefined in moments, not hours, not days, but seconds. For Keller, the flight ended as it began, with quiet precision. He shut down the engine, stepped out onto the tarmac, and allowed himself a small exhale. The cold morning air bit at his cheeks, the mist lingering around him like a veil. He knew the event would become legend, not for personal glory, but because it exemplified the harmony of human skill and engineering excellence. The F-109 had done what it was built to do, and he had executed it flawlessly. In the weeks and months that followed, the engagement became a touchstone in Luftwaffe training manuals, a story told with both respect and incredulity. Pilots studied the timing, the altitude advantage, the precision strike. Engineers examined the aircraft, marveling at its design and performance. And even among the enemy, the story was whispered with awe, the disbelief never fully fading. As the sun dipped behind the low clouds that evening, Keller walked toward the hangar, his shadow stretching long across the tarmac. He glanced back at the Bf-109, sleek and deadly even in stillness, and allowed himself a rare smile. The event, recorded in reports and memory, had already begun to grow into legend. And somewhere in the archives of the Soviet High Command, officers would write the same words over and over, unable to understand the precision and audacity they had just witnessed. Soviet generals were shocked when Bf-109s destroyed entire Yak squadrons instantly. It was more than history. It was a testament to speed, skill, and the unbreakable partnership between man and machine.